Welcome back, everyone, to another ramble video. Yes, I don't have the time nor the actual will to put together a good video this week, so I'll just do a ramble. It's going to be about the Italian update in the new Kaiserreich. So, as you may know, there's an update coming for Kaiserreich in the next weeks. Who knows exactly when. But it will involve huge amounts of just lore being changed, new countries being given focus trees, new countries being added to the game as a whole. And as you can see in front of you is one of the countries that is being changed, that is Italy. In the current iteration of Kaiserreich, you may know that the Socialist Republic of Italy is in the south, whereas the Italian Federation is in the north, and there's just a lot that's being changed because it makes sort of little sense. Some things make sense, some things don't. So they're changing it, they're making it more expansive, and they're adding a lot of balkanization in Italy, as you can see from what is going on. So you can see that there are 5 states being independent right off the bat in 1946 in the new update. So there's the Socialist Republic of Italy, which is pretty much like the old Italian Federation swapped place, right? Or rather, the Socialist Republic of Italy swapped place to where the old Italian Federation was as a heartland. So you have from Piemonte, which is in the top left with the capital Torino, Turin. You have Emilia-Romagna, which, if you can see my cursor, I'm not sure, but it is this region right below the Italian Republic and right below the Po River. Then there is Liguria, which is in the south, well, in this quote-unquote southwest. It's on the coast of the northwest, and that's like the snake up here above the flag. Then you have Tuscany, of course, the central region, and Umbria, which is the central eastern region. So these are like 4 of the more left-leaning regions in real life as well. And they were at about the time of World War I and all of that. So it makes sense that these areas would switch over to the Socialist Republic of Italy. Then you have Sardinia, which is exiled to Sardinia. That is actually the Savoyard monarchy. The Savoyard monarchy, also known as the monarchy of the House of Savoy, which used to come from Savoy in modern-day France, but then became actually the rulers of the Kingdom of Piedmont-Sardinia in the 1800s, and eventually, due to partially sheer luck, partially sheer coincidence, eventually united the Kingdom of Italy in 1861. Now, in the Kaiserreich timeline, they are exiled back to their quote-unquote homeland of Sardinia, and their little story is interesting, as we'll see. Then you have the Papal State, which is kind of like a rump that's just there to control Rome. And then you have the two Sicilies, which is the restored Bourbon monarchy. The Bourbons were, of course, originally from Spain, but had ruled the kingdoms of Naples and the two Sicilies, alternatively called, for quite a long time. And then eventually they were overthrown by Garibaldi's expedition, again in the 1860s. However, Austria has restored them to their former place, and so they control the southern half of Italy. Then you have the Italian Republic, which is an Austrian puppet state to the northeast. Now, let's move on further. You can also further balkanize Italy. In case either Austria wins or anyone wins, they can release a whole bunch of states that you can see right now. Mostly, they are states in the north, as you can see. Like, you can, of course, expand the Papal State. You can have the duchies of Modena and Parma. You cannot see Parma right now in this. I'm not sure. Is there a Duchy of Parma? I have no idea. Anyway, you have the Duchy of Modena, which is actually where I used to live. Well, not literally the state, but the city of Modena. Then you have Tuscany as an independent state. You can have Lombardy as an independent state. As you can see in this picture, Sardinia has been restored to Sardinia Piedmont with that glorious toothpaste color. And then you have the Republic of Venice, or the Serenissima, Most Serene Republic of Venice. So you can have this kind of balkanization. We'll see later. You can also restore Italy. This is from the two Sicilies path of a focus tree. From the two Sicilies, you can restore, like, the Italian Empire. Also with the House of Savoy, I believe you can restore an Italian Empire. And with the Italian Republic, you can restore a united Italian Republic, but of course it will not be a kingdom or an empire because it's a republic. Now, of the states, well, this is the Pope. Yeah, well, let's start with the Pope because he's kind of the least interesting in some ways. I mean, he's just kind of a rump that was placed there. And I'm not an expert on the lore changes. I'll do a much more in-depth video on the update after it comes out, and I can actually look into it more. If in case you want to look into this further, someone did a stream, and I'll link that in the description. So this is already the Socialist Republic. So essentially, the Pope has to deal with his place in the world, right? Because the papacy, as in real life, I've got to take a sip of coffee. As in real life, the papacy is kind of struggling to deal with the modern world, and a restored papal temporal state, temporal meaning not spiritual, as opposed to spiritual power, which is what the papacy normally has. But a restored temporal power, which is like the papal state in the Middle Ages and in the 1600s, all the way up to when the papacy was abolished as a state, which was 1860s, of course, calls into question a lot of problems. So the state has to rebuild itself. And essentially, this part of the focus tree ends up, which is I guess you could say, economic reform / all of that part of the focus tree. There's a lot of things that you can get in terms of aid from the two Sicilies, because the two Sicilies and the Pope are like buddy. And I've said buddy 7 times for a reason, because the Pope actually becomes the puppet of the two Sicilies if they take these focuses that you're looking at right now. So if you take financial aid, military aid, all of that, you're going to essentially become a dependency of the two Sicilies. And it does make sense because, of course, I mean, they're just kind of a tiny little rump. They're not the actual leaders of the Italian Federation as they used to be. Technically, the Italian Federation does still exist, but really, it does not. It's kind of like one of those things, by the law, the two Sicilies, the Papal State, Sardinia, and part of the Italian Republic as well, are supposed to be under the Italian Federation. But, and that's what the Austrians had done in the lore after World War I. They had created an Italian Federation that quickly kind of just crumbled apart because it was clearly an Austrian puppet. And as you can see, you can come down, and there's some nice Latin, which I like. And here it kind of says against the the fight against the syndicalist is not negotiable or something like that, and all of that. So that's kind of interesting. We'll see more of that soon. Now, this is, you can actually have elections as the Pope. And you can select between, I believe, social democrats and social conservatives as, maybe social liberals instead of social democrats. I don't exactly remember. Anyway, that, of course, leads down to some economy stuff. You can deal with Black Monday, blah, 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 usual stuff. Quite actually important to deal with agriculture in terms of the land that the Pope sits in is very, very agricultural, except for the city of Rome itself. So, and then you can move down to make some Roman army reforms, because the spirit of Rome lives on and all of that. Making some glorious bunkers and the legionary spirit. These icons are actually really awesome. All right, then you can have, of course, the Papal Conclave, which is about your supreme leader. Of course, this is essentially the one that was in the Italian Federation before anyway, except there's differences. So I believe John the 23rd was actually the historical Pope, funnily enough. There was a John 23rd later on, but yeah, he's like the quote-unquote social democrat of them all, and in the early Kaiserreich, or the one that would be playing right now before the update, he was the one that could make the peaceful reunification of Italy. Of course, he can't do that anymore. Although, like the Italian Federation led by the Pope, I wonder if you can make that happen again, but oh well, that's fine. And then, of course, if you take him or Stephen X, who are, again, the more populist, sort of left, quote-unquote, with many quotations, left popes, you can relinquish the temporal power and essentially turn the papal state into, like, kind of a papal tutelage. And then you have the more quote-unquote hardliners, including Pius XII, who is the historical pope for the time of the Second World War. And he's just normal. And then you have the Nazi pope. I mean, I always called him the Nazi pope, Julius IV, who is just like, yes, crusade against syndicalism, all of that. So he gets the Holy War. Then you can, say, reinforce the temporal power of the papacy and condemn mob rule, that being, you know, syndicalism, democracy, all those evil, evil things, like people wanting representation. Yes. Let's go not to the Socialist Republic. Let's first go, which one is this? This is the Republic of Italy. I want to look at Two Sicilies. Although, actually, no, right. Because the problem with the Two Sicilies, like, dev diary or whatever, is that it didn't actually show the focus tree. So I actually don't know the focus tree. Rip. Anyway, let's head north to the... Actually, maybe let's go to Sardinia. Let's go to Sardinia because, again, they're the more weaker, quote-unquote. So this is Sardinia. Of course, they start off with a relatively strong fleet because they're a bit like the national France of Italy. So this is like the old government of Italy that's fled from both the Austrians and the Socialists in mainland Italy and has fled to Sardinia. Capital is, as you can see, Cagliari, which is the biggest city in all of Sardinia. And it's not, that's not saying much. Still, as you can see, there's fully fledged parties and all of that. The king is Amadeo I, who looks relatively handsome and very inbred because the Savoys were quite inbred. The flag, I have no idea where it comes from, but you actually do have a pretty cool little focus tree. Essentially, this one is going to be as hard or maybe even harder than the actual Pope, because you're just a tiny little rump as well. Like, you're in exile, as you can see. This is like the political part. You're in exile from everywhere else. You need to strengthen your ties to the Auntaunt, and you're essentially protected by the Auntaunt fleet as well as your own from everyone else just coming in and crushing you, which is awesome. You can say there's two choices that you need to make. So you can either be a Sardinian nationalist or regionalist, and essentially you're like Italy's Taiwan, right? So Taiwan today has this sort of dichotomy between Taiwan independence or the, I guess, old claim of the Republic of China. Of course, it's like a different situation, but it's relatively similar in here. You can either embrace your new Sardinian identity and say, whatever, we're Sardinia, we're just going to try to stay independent. And there's actually kind of an independence movement in Sardinia that's been going on for like hundreds of years, and it still does kind of exist today, like a kind of independentist feeling among Sardinia, because Sardinia culturally and especially linguistically as well is very, very separate from the rest of Italy. Actually, a little bit more similar in some ways to Spain and France, but it's really its own independent thing. Like, if you listen to someone speaking in the Sardinian language and you understand Italian, you will not understand the Sardinian language. It's just completely different. And culturally, there's also a lot of different things. Like, Sardinia has its own history, all of that. So there's, like, I guess you could say the cultural claim to independence. However, because of political considerations, of course, a Sardinian independent state is not viable. In this Kaiserreich timeline, of course, you can try to make it viable, and you have two options. You have the Reformists, also known as the Social Democrats, I believe. Are they Social Democrats? Yes, they are. So the Riformisti Sardi, which means Sardinian Reformists, or the Partido Sardo, because Sardinians are just, Jesus hell. They're the Conservatives, and that means Sardinian Party, basically. Or you can say, we are the legitimate kingdom of Italy, god damn it, and disappear our rivals, royal decrees, all of that. And that leads down to this part of the focus tree, I believe, and that is to say, if you somehow manage to reconquer mainland Italy, you can first, after you've destroyed the Syndicalists, proclaim the restoration of Piedmont-Sardinia, which is what you see over here. Where is it? This one. So Sardinia, that controls Piedmont over there in the top left corner, as you can see, which in real life was created after the Congress of Vienna, first and foremost. And then you can say strike at the Italian Republic, which is the Austrian puppet, strike at False Kingdom, that being the Bourbon two Sicilies, and say we are the king of all Italians. So you can actually restore Italy as it was historically, in a way, essentially without the fascists, but still the Italian Savoyards essentially governed as kings all the way up to 1946, when there was a referendum that evicted them and created the Republic. Thankfully, because no one wanted it anymore. Kappa. Anyway, jokes aside, we do have also a part of course, military, which is, again, heavily kind of reliant on your allies of the Auntaunt. You can, as you can see, it's kind of focused on, for like the army stuff, it's focused on artillery and doctrines and kind of like the more indirect quality type of approach, because Sardinia does not have that many people. So as you can see, you have 19 manpower. You're not going to be strong. Then, of course, the navy is very important, and you need to expand. There's a lot of typos, by the way. You need to expand the dockyards of Caligari instead of Cagliari. Pretty big difference in pronunciation. Expand the island base is actually kind of interesting that there is that thing, because I'm not sure exactly what they mean by that, but it is kind of interesting because Sardinia is not just one island. There's like tiny little islands all over it. For example, you can see it like there in the dotted line that goes to Corsica. Near there's actually an island called Maddalena, which houses a important submarine base in real life. Both, I believe, it used to do that both in like the 1930s and all of that. It does so all the way up to today, where today it's actually a base for American submarines, I'm pretty sure. So, and it supposedly is also really, really beautiful, but I've never been there, so I don't know. And that's, I think, what that means. So kind of a nice little trivia. So you can also focus on, of course, either having a supporting navy or a fleeting being. Like the fleeting being, again, it's kind of that doctrine where you have these big ships, you don't commit them to battles, but you keep them essentially in your ports as an active threat, right? They're there, so the enemy has to worry about them. And that, of course, for a nation that can't really replenish its navies, because of course you're just in Sardinia, you have what you have, you can't build new ships. As that kind of nation, of course, you're going to need to be very, very conservative with what your essentially your assets are, and you can either say fleet being or a supporting navy for the various other Entente navies that actually have the capacity to replenish their navies, such as the Canadian one, such as the national French one, and all of that. And then you have a Sardinian air fleet with some cool pictures, and yeah. I like how there's coastal flybys as like a little doctrinal thing or whatever. And yes, Sardinia, of course, is an unmoving carrier. Coastal flybys is kind of funny because like somehow like the Italian Air Force has some pretty famous like acrobatic squadrons and all of that. So yeah, that's interesting. No, I don't care about this. Bye-bye. So that's Sardinia. Let's go to the Socialist Republic up to the northwest rather. So that is actually like the most, except for Milano, which is the capital of the Italian Republic, and parts of Veneto, which is that top right sort of area, directly east of Milano. The area that the Socialist Republic of Italy controls is the most industrialized, the most economically strong, and yeah, the most advanced and modern part of Italy. So you can see that their economy tree is like the biggest, and it's got more options, which is this one. There's actually two paths here. One of them is for the Nationalist Syndicalists. Let's take a look at actually the politics. Unfortunately, they did not bloody screenshot the actual political screen, but still, like, there's three main factions. There is the Christian socialists, that being the radical socialists. There are the syndicalists, normal, just syndicalists, and then there's the national syndicalists or the nationalists, and that is of course Mussolini's little gang of Nazis. So, of course, a little bit more radical on the right side, whereas on the left side, it's more like, well, one of them is weird because there's Christian socialism, and actually it is a thing that unfortunately exists in Italy because, of course, there's the Vatican and there's socialists, so there's going to be people who think that these two things can stick together. And yes, it is a thing. Anyway, there's also syndicalists that just promote workplace democracy and syndicalism and all of that, which is like, the normal syndicalist stuff. So that's nothing too strange. It's just a regular, just Kaiserreich syndicalist tree. And it splits into two as well with the economy. So there's either a more state control tree, which is the one on the right side, where you create the IRI, the Istituto per la Ricostruzione Industriale, which means the Institute for Industrial Reconstruction, which actually is a historical thing. Like, it was created in real life by the fascists to sort of... What it essentially did was it bought up industries that were failing, because the heavy industry in Italy and essentially every very, very concentrated, very, very big industry that wasn't like a local small firms in Italy used to be created essentially with state participation. So because Italy had been essentially in some ways regressing economically for hundreds of years by the point of the Industrial Revolution, by the point of the unification, what happened was that to create an industrial base, to find the capital needed, the state had to intervene and sort of patch things up and put in capital and put in loans so that these big industries could be created. And what that created was a few industries with very heavy state participation at sort of the more modern sectors of industry, such as the petrochemical sector, such as the automotive industry, such as the shipbuilding industry. This was, by the way, essentially at the end of the 1800s. So you have a few of these big industries created, some of which are actually quite famous, such as Fiat for cars, such as, well, it used to be important, Montecatini for petrochemicals. Actually, no, chemicals. Then you have, for petrochemicals, you had Eni, and although Eni was more important in the later years of the 1950s and all of that. And sort of this was how industry was run, right? Because Italy had arrived a little bit too late to the actual industrial revolution. So what it had to do was it had to kind of artificially create these bigger industries. And everything else was just kind of stuck, being too small to compete. And once these industries started to slow down, and essentially after the big industrial expansion during World War I, in the 20s there was an economic slowdown due to many reasons. So the fascists created this IRI to essentially buy up industries that were failing and increase state control over the economy to prevent essentially industries from failing and industrial capital from dissipating. So this is kind of what happened. It led to big public debt, of course, and it was also kind of linked to the whole autarky movement about 10 years down the line. But of course, this is not really that important in Kaiserreich, so I'm just going to stop rambling about that. Anyway, it's what the nationalist syndicalists can do, and of course, this leads to a more militarized economy, more nationalized industry, and all of that. Whereas on the left-hand side, you can see that there is the communal syndicalism line, which is just the regular stuff. You focus on agrarian communes, a decentralized economy, all of that. Worker cooperatives, which are in real life actually kind of very present in the area that is slightly to the south of the Italian Republic, the province of Emilia-Romagna, and also a little bit to Piemonte, which is to the left-hand side where the capital Torino is. So, yeah. It's actually kind of a historical thing and very realistic. Anyway, this is the army tree, nothing strange. With the army, what you have is that since the Socialist Republic of Italy has essentially been a rebel state, it rose up against the Austrian occupations and against the nationalist Italian Republic and against the Austrian sort of plans of restorationism, is that, of course, its military is composed of ragtag bands of militias, the Guardie Rosse, the Red Guards, These are also a historical thing. They did rise up during the 1920s. There were 2 years called the Biennio Rosso, the 2 red years, where Italy was essentially there was like a wave of socialist unrest that almost kind of turned Italy also into a Soviet republic. Sort of the battle cry was, let's do it like Russia. And there were like occupations of factories and sometimes towns as well by these Guardie Rosse, the Red Guards. And of course, hold on, I got a coffee again. And of course, if you actually establish the Socialist Republic as an independent state, you're going to have to deal with the actual army issue. Are you going to create a sort of organized army, which in this case is called the Armata Rossa, which is Red Army. It's the way we also call the, like in history textbooks, if you look at the Soviet Red Army, you're going to see it called Armata Rossa. And that dissolves the Red Guards. It centralizes command and is more focused on mobility, whereas the Guardie Rosse is more focused on defensive firepower. And then you can have also Aeronautica Rossa, or Red Air Force, and a Red Navy. Nothing really too strange in there, to be completely honest. It's just what you'd expect. Alright, then you can take a look at the Republic of Italy. For some reason I left this up, perhaps because I thought that... No, I probably just thought that I needed like a reminder that this was the Italian Republic. Italian Republic, in case you don't remember, is up there. It's actually an Austrian puppet at the start. Because, yay, Austria. I mean, nobody likes Austria. Anyway, derping aside, this is the political tree. The Italian Republic is the other national, or not, the other wasn't really a nationalist. The other one was the Socialist Republic of Italy. The other, I guess you could say, revolting faction from the chaos that essentially followed the Austrian takeover after World War I. But the Italian Republic was saved from the Socialist Republic because it was actually losing the war, the civil war against the Socialist Republic, by the Austrians. And in turn, it is essentially a puppet. It is actually under military control under Field Marshal Emilio de Bono, which, you can see his name over here, Emilio de Bono, who in real life was a Marshal of Italy during the fascist period. And, he's like the head of government. However, the head of state. However, it's actually the one with the most expansive political tree because it's kind of like the last remnant of real Italy, or whatever you want to call it. So this is where a lot of like the political environment of in real life 1920s, 1910s Italy has seeped into. There's actually a lot of names of political formations that were around. So there's 4 paths. There's the Liberal Democrats, or Partito Liberale Democratico, who are more left-leaning, except, they do like their Catholicism as well. There is the Partito Repubblicano Italiano, which is the more laic. Is that a term in English? No, it isn't. It's more secular. It's more secular, and Repubblicano is actually a kind of throwback to the ideals of Mazzini, who was this famous Italian nationalist during the 1800s, who had advocated for essentially the reunification of Italy by essentially creating societies all over Italy that would try to organize uprisings and all of that. It's very, very complicated. I'm not going to talk into it right now, but it is like the more liberal democratic path. And it's, I believe, market liberal. And the Partito Repubblicano Italiano actually, I believe, is like the oldest today, the oldest standing Italian political party, like the longest running, longest existing Italian political party, still active. I'm not that like it practically doesn't exist anymore, but it does sometimes like participate in elections and all that. It's kind of funny. Anyway, so as you can see, like they try to go with like stable democracy. It's like, yes, we are stable. Then there is the conservatives, the Partito Popolare Italiano, just standard Italian People's Party, just what you'd expect. You have traditional values, church ties, You try to, try to have like a traditional economy, blah, 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 Austrian ties, good administration, nothing particularly strange there. And then you can have the fascist stand-ins, the Anni, which in Italian you probably, that sounds too, it shouldn't sound funny. It's very, very immature. It means anuses. If you like the word itself would mean anuses, anus to the plural. But it is an acronym for Associazione Nazionalista Italiana, the Italian Nationalist Association. And their tree is all about, like, we don't like syndicalists, we don't like Austria, and we like Italian nationalism. So literally they're the fascists. Also, their leaders are Italo Balbo, and I don't exactly remember who else was listed there as a leader, but Italo Balbo is like one of the more famous Italian fascists. So yeah, these guys are literally the fascists, and their objective is to make great Italy great again, as many have tried many times and failed throughout the history. Anyway, one of the funny things that I don't think, like, the only thing of this whole focus tree that I don't think, like, people wouldn't just understand what it is this Acrebo laws under destroy Austrian influence in the absolute right corner. And this is actually spelled wrong. It's supposed to be Acerbo with Acerbo. And they were laws that were put into place in 1923 by essentially the first fascist administration. It was a kind of like reform of the electoral system that was supposed to be making it easier for the fascists to get reelected. Of course, there was basically never ever another re-election. There was a plebiscite once, but then the fascists ended up not even needing to get re-elected anymore because they imposed dictatorship. Anyway, anecdotes aside, essentially, it's kind of a nice little historical sprinkle that they put in there. So if the nationalists do get elected, they will probably essentially end elections and make sure that there's no more elections. Whereas I think that if these other parties get elected, probably there's going to be like continuous elections where you can pick, like, I don't know, do you want the Republicans in there? Do you want the Democrats in there? Just what you'd expect. Anyway, going down the economy route, this region that the Italian Republic occupies, the Veneto, the Friuli, and the Lombardia, these are the three, I guess you could say, real-life regions that they occupy, are also very economically advanced compared to the southern regions of Italy. So, as you can see, their economic tree is quite expansive. It's got a lot of options that you can have supporting the auto industry. Although in real life, like, these areas aren't very known for the auto industry. The auto industry is more important both in Emilia-Romagna, which is the region directly south of the Italian Republic, and in Piedmonte, which is the region directly west of the Italian Republic. So both of these actually are in the territory of the SRI, the Socialist Republic of Italy. But, of course, if the Italian Republic was an independent state in that form, it would try to support its own auto industry. It can create the Istituto Luce. You can see down here, down after modernized agriculture. The Istituto Luce is actually like the first major, I guess you could say, like, cinema studios type of thing. It eventually evolved into kind of like a, it's kind of like the first Italian cinema kind of conglomerate. Not exactly sure how to call it, but yeah, it's basically that. To promote, like, the visual arts and all of that. It was established in real life. I don't exactly know when, but probably under fascism. And then you can go down and have economic planning, all of that. Then there's some of them that require, I think, you to, like, expand southward, like industrialize the south most likely. Then to the right, you have military contracts who can expand the arsenal in Veneto, Venetian arsenals, all that. Market protection, which actually in real life, Italy did rely quite a bit on market protectionism. And then, again, to protect those like fledgling state capital industries that I talked about earlier. Synthetic research, which is quite historical. Italy was quite ahead in terms of the chemical industry. And you can go down and actually, it says here, expand the autostrada for the infrastructure line, which is kind of bold, to be honest, because autostrada in Italian just means highway. But what it refers to that is the national highway network, which in real life only was a thing after the end of World War II. So you can't really expand something that doesn't exist. Should have probably said build the autostrade or something like that. And then you can have the Italian miracle at the end. Actually, in the post-war years in the 50s and 60s, Italy was one of the fastest growing economies. In fact, the fastest growing economy in Europe, and that's referencing that. Then this is the political/foreign policy line, which is just what you'd expect. You can begin Risorgimento. Risorgimento in Italian means rebirth, essentially. And it's what Italian nationalists say to refer to, actually, even in public schools and the official studying of Italian history, the Risorgimento is the period that essentially brings Italy back onto the map. And it depends, there's some people that define it differently slightly, but most people understand it this way. Most people understand the Risorgimento as what happens around the 1860s when Italy is reunified, 1861 being the big date. And in Kaiserreich, of course, Risorgimento is supposed to be all these Italian factions struggling to reunite Italy. So, of course, the main objective for the Italian Republic is to destroy the SRI, the godless syndicalists and all of that to their southwest. After that, they can go ahead and try to take Sardinia, take Roma, or say the Venetian Concordat. Venetian Concordat probably just stipulates a pact of some kind with the Pope, a little bit in the same way as in real life the Italian fascists had done a pact with the, at the time it was still the just Pope, because his temporal authority had been taken away from him, and he was not an independent state. Of course, you may know that today the Pope is an independent state, the Vatican City, and he was given this tiny speck of land in the middle of Rome by Mussolini as a kind of compromise. The papacy before then had essentially ordered to Catholics not to participate in the politics of Italy as a protest against the Savoyard monarchy that had essentially taken away the papacy's independence and the papacy's temporal power. In real life, after these 1927 accords, also known as the Patti Lateranensi or the Lateranensian Pax, not sure if there's an English translation, after that, essentially what the Pope said was, okay, good, we're not going to interfere with the fascist party in any way, and we're just going to support essentially the fascist party, not too overtly, but we're going to support it, and you're going to give us independence, quote unquote, both independence and essentially recognition. So you can probably do something of the sort with the Italian Republic. Then you can go down and take Naples. Judging by that icon, probably the take Naples focus is going to involve some kind of uprising in Naples, which might be a throwback to how Italian nationalists tried and eventually succeeded under Giuseppe Garibaldi to essentially reunite the peninsula through, initially what they wanted to do was having essentially a sudden popular revolution topple the Bourbons. Then, of course, you go down and say Italy's united, you need to unite your lands, Sicily, Sardinia, and then have plebiscites for Trento and Trieste, which, if we take a look at the map, right now, you can see that Italian flag up in the north, right, above the Italian Republic. That's where Trento is. It's the modern region of Alto Adige or Südtirol, South Tyrol, and it's one of the big irredentist claims. Trieste is a little bit further to the east of the Italian Republic's actual borders in this picture. It's a town on the coast, of the Adriatic Sea. And it's another one that, like, oh no, the Austrians controlled Trieste, which we must take it back, and all of that. And later on, it was actually disputed with Yugoslavia as well. Yugoslavs call it Turst, which is absurd. It's clearly Italian. Anyway, so you can have a plebiscite for those two things because, of course, they're under the control of Austria. A plebiscite is essentially like you ask the people there, hey, do you want to be Italian? Yes, no. It was like I guess, pretty common nationalist tactic in the 1800s and 1900s to kind of show, like, oh yeah, look, this is our territory and all of that. One of those funny things nationalists do all the time. And then you can choose a Malta policy, because Italian nationalists also claim Malta, because whatever. And there's actually, I believe, in the update, going to be a way where Malta can be independent. Which should be pretty awesome. Anyway, Italian irredentism is essentially the Italian irredentism policy. So the Italian irredentist claims are not just Trento and Trieste. It's just all of the terre irredente, or not given lands, or not returned, unreturned lands. So that being, well, in this picture, the lands that would claim to Greater Italy would be Dalmatia to the east of the Adriatic. You can see it's actually blacked out in here. Istria, which is that little peninsula to the east of the Italian Republic, that's controlled by Austria. Then it would be Corsica. It would be parts of France, actually, Savoy and Nice, or Nizza in Italian. So probably that's just how you're going to go about, reclaiming those lands. Are you going to go ahead and reclaim those lands, or are you going to be a pussy? Of course, there's an army tree, which is what you'd expect. Pretty much just, nothing really too particular. A lot of special forces. There's 3 policies that you can take. It's either mobility, firepower, or planning, just what you'd expect. National Republican Air Force and the National Republican Navy. Yeah, what you'd expect. And then you have the minors. So you saw that there is like the possibility of breaking up Italy into a massive amount of minor little countries. And what's awesome is that some of these are actually quite in a way, quote unquote, historical. Like, for example, this is Modena. This one is actually Lombardia, but one of them is Modena. It was actually explained by this glorious Minor Monday update, and it's pretty cool. So you can balkanize Italy, and you can spit out minors. Oh yeah, there was Parma. Wow, I didn't know. Anyway, so there is Parma, and its flag is really awesome. But this is what it's going to look like in... Oh my god, that's so horrible. No, I don't want to look at that. And this is Modena. You can see that here the ruling house is Asburgo Este, or Habsburg Este, the Este or Estensi, where the ruling house of essentially Modena and Ferrara. Fucking hell, I'm going to need a Google Maps, am I? So that you can just orientate yourself. This is Modena, up here. And then we can take a look at Ferrara. So how it used to be was that these two cities were 2 duchies that were united under the House of Estensi, or Este. And first, like, the main one was Ferrara, but then the main one was turned into Modena. And for example, you can see this palace is their ducal palace in Modena, which is today the seat of the Modena Military Academy. So it's actually kind of still important for the Italian army in some way. And that's about it. You can, as Modena, glorious little state, you can actually have your own generals, which have portraits. Cool. You have your own very expansive army tree, because of course you have that glorious military academy, and that affords you a bit of strategic autonomy and all of that. I kind of like that, to be honest. Just this tiny little state that rises back up. I wonder if you can like reclaim Italy or something. you can also have the State of Emilia. Wait, what? As the head of State of Emilia. What? Oh, it shares a focus tree to the... Okay. Ah, okay. I understand. Still though, wait, what? Isn't there supposed to be an economy tree? Oh no, it's the one on the right. Okay. So you can also have like an economy tree, which is kind of cool. Look at that picture. It's like from one of those World War I artworks. It's kind of interesting. And of course, this is like a region that's very, very industrialized with rural agro-industry essentially. So you have a lot of flavor. You have a lot of schooling stuff you can do. And of course, the Ferrari automobile factories, which are very, very well known today for luxury cars, but they also made aircraft. Yes, this is historical, Ferrari aircraft. And so you do have some options that are kind of interesting. And then to the extreme right, you can see the, say, like, end the anarchy, ducal constitution. Then you can have Emilian identity and save the Emilian language, which is kind of funny because I cannot speak Emilian, but I kind of understand it. It is actually a separate language, and it's kind of funny. It sounds very, very awesome. Anyway, that's the end for that. The other minor that you can be is Lombardy. That is relatively well developed. The ruler is from the Visconti family, which were the rulers of Milan in like the 14th century or something. And you have your own tree there with some awesome icons. Look at that serpent. That is the Visconti house emblem. You can see represented also in the top left upon the coat of arms of Milan. Lombard nationalism, just a whole lot of cool stuff. And you can also have, wow, you can also have a the Golden Ambrosian idea. Wasn't the Ambrosian Republic a thing? So why would you denounce it if you're the universal suffrage? I do not know much about the history of Milan. I have no idea. Yeah. And it's pretty cool. I believe the Lombard crown is in Austria. So, yeah, that's... By the way, all these minors are kind of like supposed to be Austrian puppets as well, in some ways of the lore. Or either Austrian puppets or Two Sicilies puppets. In some way, they're supposed to be puppets of other foreign powers. What would be awesome is if these miners had actually like tiny syndicalist trees as well. Supposedly, like if they're French puppets, like for example, if the Socialist Republic of Italy was defeated and then the French come in and swoop back up or something like that, it would be kind of nice. And yeah, so you of course have just a tiny army tree and a tiny economy tree, as you'd expect. I mean, still very industrialized region, so there's a bit of that. Then you also have other minors. You have Venice and you have Tuscany. This one is Tuscany. So of course you can see that one of these is a Habsburg ruler. He's got some national spirits. I wonder what those are, but they look pretty syndicalist, considering the red and black. Anyway, yeah, remove the syndicalist economy, root out syndicalist government influence, because this is the one for Tuscany. Tuscany is a region that, of course, in Kaiserreich now is going to be under the Socialist Republic of Italy, and it's also a region where sort of left-wing politics are popular. So yeah, you're going to need to re-educate the province or whatever, and you can have the glorious second Renaissance or modern Renaissance, which is kind of awesome. Kind of like a little flavor. Look, it's Tuscany, it's the Renaissance. And you can have either a cultural revolution or an industrial revolution. Most likely that's going to be the right side is more about like industrial modifiers, whereas the left-hand side is more about political modifiers. You have an army tree, the elite Tuscan army. I love it, the Tuscan Raiders. They should have called the Tuscan Marines the Tuscan Raiders just for trolling. Anyway, Tuscan Royal Air Corps, the Grosseto base, which, yes, in real life is also a airfield, and export admirals. I wonder what that is. Anyway, then you have Venice as well. You can restore the most serene Republic of Venice. And actually one thing is that Venice is different from all these other ones, because Venice, and this is why I actually kept this dev diary or whatever up, is that Venice can actually rise up if the Italian nationalists take over in the Italian Republic. So that's kind of interesting, because Veneto is kind of like one of those more one of those regions that is always looking for more autonomy within Italy, right? Even today, there's like kind of more this Venetian autonomism that's going on, and so of course, within the Italian Republic, which is not a federation, but it does give autonomy to certain ethnic groups, such as, well, not really ethnic groups, but like regions such as Veneto. If the nationalists come in, they want to centralize everything. So there's actually a possibility that this Venetian Republic will essentially rise up against Venice. So as you can see, a smart or exceptionally lucky AI can lead Venice to victory, because of course the Republic has the upper hand. Of course, a player can also decide to tag over to Venice and try to win. Anyway, you can of course have like a little nice political game, because Venice was always very, very active in the Adriatic. As you can see, you have a Trieste policy, you have an Istria policy, you have a Dalmatia policy, and you can try to side with the major sort of coalitions. Of course, since you're mostly a maritime power as Venice, you can side with the Auntaunt, because, well, you make sense into that coalition. You can have the Auntaunt come in and reinforce you. You can, of course, side with Austria, because they're there, or you can side with Germany, because they're Germany. And Venice, of course, has a very, very long Republican tradition, and that is shown in the focus tree. You can have like a kind of new merchant republic, glorious aristocratic oligarchy, or you can have a new republic, essentially a modern democracy. Nice little flavor. Then you, of course, have a relatively cool little economy tree, because Venice was always known for its trade and all of that. Bounty of the sea, lovely. And yeah, that's about it for that. You also have a very, very expansive navy tree, of course, and you can have a thalassocracy, which means sea dominance and all of that. Fanti da Mar is naval infantry, all of that, just what you'd expect. And yeah, you can even try to build Venice's aircraft carriers, which is kind of funny. Because that's not what normally comes to mind with like historically appropriate pairings, but yeah, it is there. This video has been running way too long already, so I'm gonna end it very, very quickly. Then you have, of course, the army stuff, but Venice was never really known to be a land power. That's it, essentially. There's also a new map for Italy, I believe. Yeah, this is just all of that. Yeah. What did you expect? Anyway. What is this? Oh, okay, it's just that. I thought that I'd missed it. Anyway, no, not this. This, whatever. There's a new way the map is arranged. The states have been changed so that this map is actually possible, and it's actually a lot more realistic now. Anyway, I am actually going to end this right now because it's getting way too long, and it was just a ramble. I hope that you've enjoyed. My actual knowledge of Italian history is not that good, but I will do some reading up before the actual Kaiserreich update comes out, which, if I saw this correctly, and it might not be, I sure hope it is though, is coming out next Friday. So if it is, you can expect a lot of Kaiserreich videos in the week after that, and a lot of Kaiserreich streaming in those 2 days. So yes, I hope that you've enjoyed. I hope that I will see you soon, and yeah, take care.